Welcome to our cooking recipe. Today we're making a classic meatloaf. This comforting and hearty dish is perfect for a family dinner, and it's surprisingly simple to make. We'll start by gathering our ingredients, then we'll move through 5 easy steps. Along the way, I'll share some tips to ensure your meatloaf turns out perfectly juicy and flavorful. So, let's get started and enjoy the process of making this delicious classic meatloaf together. Alright, let's talk about the ingredients for our classic meatloaf while we're prepping. First up, we have 1.5 pounds of ground beef, and we're using 80% lean to keep it juicy. Next, we need 1 cup of breadcrumbs. These help bind everything together. If you have plain or seasoned breadcrumbs, either will work fine. Now grab a medium onion and chop it finely. This adds great flavor and a bit of moisture. Don't forget the garlic. Mince 2 cloves for that wonderful aroma and taste. We'll also need 1 large egg beaten. This helps bind the meatloaf, making sure it holds its shape. For moisture and richness, add 3/4 cup of milk. It really makes a difference in texture. Add 2 tablespoons of ketchup and 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce for some tangy, savory depth. For herbs, we're using 1 teaspoon each of dried thyme and oregano. These add a nice herbal note. Season it all with 1 teaspoon of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper to enhance the flavors. If you like, you can throw in 1 tablespoon of chopped parsley for a fresh touch. Now for the glaze. In a small bowl, mix 1/4 cup of ketchup, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, and 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard. This sweet and tangy glaze caramelizes beautifully on top of the meatloaf. Alright, now that we've got our ingredients prepped, let's start mixing everything together and get this meatloaf ready for the oven. Okay, let's get started with step 1. Preheat and prepare. First, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 175 degrees Celsius. This ensures our meatloaf will cook evenly and thoroughly. While the oven is heating up, let's prepare our loaf pan. Lightly grease it with some oil or cooking spray. This will prevent the meatloaf from sticking to the pan and make it easier to remove later. Alternatively, you can line the pan with parchment paper. Just cut a piece to fit the bottom and sides of the pan. This method also helps with easy removal and makes cleaning up a breeze. Once that's done, we're ready to move on to mixing our meatloaf ingredients. Now, let's move on to step 2. Mix the meatloaf. Grab a large bowl and start adding your ingredients. First, add the 1.5 pounds of ground beef. Next, pour in 1 cup of breadcrumbs. These will help bind everything together. Now add the finely chopped medium onion and the minced garlic from 2 cloves. These add great flavor and a bit of moisture. Crack open a large egg and beat it before adding it to the bowl. This helps bind the meatloaf, making sure it holds its shape. Pour in 3/4 cup of milk for moisture and richness. Next, add 2 tablespoons of ketchup and 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce for that tangy, savory depth. Sprinkle in 1 teaspoon each of dried thyme and dried oregano for a nice herbal note. Season everything with 1 teaspoon of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper to enhance the flavors. If you're using parsley, add 1 tablespoon of chopped parsley for a fresh touch. Now gently mix all these ingredients together. It's important not to overwork the meat. Mix until everything is just combined. Overmixing can make the meatloaf dense and tough, and we want it to be nice and tender. Once everything is mixed, we're ready to shape and place the meatloaf in the pan. Now we're on to step 3, shape and place in pan. Take your prepared meatloaf mixture and transfer it into the greased or parchment-lined loaf pan. Use your hands or a spatula to press it down gently, making sure it's evenly shaped and smooth on top. Tip: if you prefer a meatloaf with a crispier exterior, you can freeform it on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper instead of using a loaf pan. Just shape it into a loaf shape directly on the sheet. Once your meatloaf is shaped and ready, we'll move on to preparing the glaze in the next step. Let's move on to step 4. Prepare and apply the glaze. In a small bowl, combine 1/4 cup of ketchup, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, and 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard. Mix these ingredients together until you have a smooth, well-blended glaze. Once your glaze is ready, take half of it and spread it evenly over the top of your shaped meatloaf. This initial layer will start to caramelize as the meatloaf bakes, adding a wonderful sweet and tangy flavor. Tip: make sure to reserve the remaining half of the glaze. We'll use it later to add another layer of flavor during the cooking process. Now we're ready to bake our meatloaf. Finally, we're at step 5, bake, rest, and serve. Place your meatloaf in the preheated oven and bake it for about 45 to 55 minutes. We're looking for an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit or 70 degrees Celsius to ensure it's fully cooked. About 10 minutes before the baking time is up, take out the meatloaf and brush the remaining glaze on top. This will add another layer of flavor and a beautiful caramelized finish. Once the meatloaf is done, remove it from the oven and let it rest in the pan for about 10 minutes. This resting period helps the juices redistribute, making the meatloaf easier to slice. Tip: for cleaner slices, use a serrated knife and wipe the blade between cuts. Serve your delicious meatloaf with mashed potatoes, steamed vegetables, or a fresh salad. Enjoy your meal!